advanced wrap training virtual session here this morning. In support of Arlon's oldest global distributor, that's Computer Letter. We're honoured to be working with them. They're an outstanding distributor, always looking to support their customers. And as you guys know now in lockdown, especially during these tough times we're all facing right now. Please, this session is for you guys, and we'll be guided by you on what you'd like to see and we actively encourage your interaction. My name's Neil. I'm here in the Australian part of the world as the sales director for Australia and New Zealand. Also joined online is James Smith, who also helps us across the region. Sarah, who is in our customer success team. She's also based in Australia. And from Computer Letter, we have Dina here to help answer any distribution, availability, pricing questions. But mostly today we'll be in the hands of Callum James, who I think you can see on your screen. So despite his youthful appearance, he has in fact been in the industry for 17 years in the sign and graphics industry, with a major stint as a head rapper at Exotic Graphix in Melbourne, where he was instrumental in then winning Rap Like a King, not once, but twice. So Callum is certainly well honed. His skills are particularly amazing in this industry. So we're here to help you, and Callum will be taking you through very shortly. But before we do that, I'd like to get a few housekeeping rules and guidelines and requests. Can you mute your microphone unless we have to come to you for a specific question? And if you put your mouse down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a couple of buttons that pop up, Q&A and chat. Please use the Q&A and chat function to ask questions. And if you hit the chat function, a little sidebar comes up and we can all see your questions. And if you want to ask a question specifically, there's another button that says raise your hand. And again, we'll see that, and then we can come to you if there's a particular question you'd like to ask. So hit the keyboards, and just to encourage you with your activity this morning and to get interactive, Cal's got a little giveaway that we'll be giving away this morning. I don't know if Cal can hold that up, but it's a wrap tool pouch, and that's going to be given to the person that asked the most unique but relative question to us this morning. So again, please hit the keyboard, give us your best answers, please interact. We're definitely here to answer your questions, not just to spout about our product. So let's get going. The first topic that we're going to cover this morning is, and Cal's going to be using this product this morning, so we need to cover it off straight away, is SLX Plus. Now that's our premium cast wrap film using low profile flight technology. Offers superior repositionability, effortless release liner, faster wraps with one installer, vibrant print quality, clean removability, and smooth paint-like finish. In addition to that, we've added superior print and cut. So again, Cal will not be talking a bit about that, and particularly interesting for you guys in New Zealand with your somewhat northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere extremes of weather. All season wrap, so it operates in lower temperatures and still can be used in the high temperatures as well, and also multi-surface ability as well, to be used on paint and also stainless steel, polished aluminium, etc. So without further ado, that's what we're going to be jumping in with, and then Cal will give us a headline on some of the other topics that he'll cover. And also, if you have any questions, don't forget, you can ask questions. We will get the best out of this today. Okay, over to you, Cal.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. Good morning. First off, big thanks again to Computer Letter for hosting this webinar and for the Lockdown Learning Initiative that they've been putting on. So we are here in my home workshop. I'm in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne, and like a lot of you guys, we are still in lockdown too. So that's why I'm coming to you via Zoom rather than seeing you face to face. I had multiple trips planned to get to New Zealand this year. For those of you who don't know, I am actually a Kiwi. from Dunedin, so it's going home for me. Obviously, a lot of those trips couldn't go ahead. I did squeeze one trip into Auckland in between the lockdowns. So I mentioned that because obviously it's preferred to do these sort of things face to face, but this is, I guess, the best that we can do with what we've got. So with the help of my cameras here, I've got 4 cameras set up. This is the first time I've done this, so hopefully I can capture and convey everything as well as possible. I've got Cohen behind the scenes from Computer Letter helping out as well with the shifting cameras and stuff. So bear with us as we work through this. If at any point you can't see what I'm doing or I've moved too fast, just throw something in the chat box. Hey, Cal, can you do that again? And I'll address that. Neil's talked about the Q&A. Again, I really want this to be interactive. I've got a bunch of set stuff that I can go through, but I really want to hear from you guys as well. I want to make sure that I talk to the questions that you have and answer things that you want to know. I'm going to try asking you guys a couple of questions as we go as well. I'm going to start with just a simple yes or no question. I'll see how this works. So just typing in the chat, yes or no. Have I met any of you before? So if I have, type a yes. If not, no. I might have met you guys in Auckland or Hamilton earlier this year, or potentially way back in Christchurch at the NZSDA Awards when I was with Exotic Graphix. So, and that'll actually give me yeses.
We've got a few yeses, Cal. So
that gives me a good idea as to who's seen what before as well. So for everybody saying no, that's great. That means everything that you see today is going to be new, as in I haven't talked about it before. So quickly, I'm just going to run through the agenda. What are we going to do today? Well, it's a wrap webinar. The main focus is going to be on wrapping techniques, more specifically my preferred wrap techniques. So you can see here I've got a Hyundai iLoad door, sliding door that I'll do some demos on. I've got a door handle set up on the table over there. I've got a Mazda 2 front guard. So I'm going to be doing a bit of demoing on everything. There are, of course, many different ways you can go about wrapping something. Everything that I do is what I believe to be best practice. So I understand there's always variations and personal preferences, and that's okay. So as Neil mentioned, the film that we're going to be using is our flagship digital wrap film, which is SLX Plus. And actually, while I mention SLX Plus, can everybody type yes or no? Have you used SLX Plus before? Because that'll help gauge where you guys are at with it. So I'm going to jump up in a second over to the whiteboard. I'm just going to cover off a very brief introduction on SLX Plus and flight technology. I'm going to talk quickly about cleaning and preparation because they're so important, but then we're going to jump into actual wrapping and techniques. So I want to get into the hands-on stuff pretty quickly. Some of the other things that we're going to cover today, not necessarily in this order, heating and tension, my preferred squeegee technique, wrapping deep recesses on the iLoad here, pre-stretch and shrink wrapping door handles. We're going to cover post-heating, and then some other intermediate to advanced wrap techniques such as hiding joins on highlights, using knifeless tape to do butt joins, using a laser level to speed up installs. I really love this trick. And my favorite technique for wrapping sharp corners or tight corners. So those are some of the things we will get to. Yes.
Well, so Cal, while you get set up, there's been a couple of questions, but I might just jump in. And somebody's asked, so lots of people have said no, lots of people have said yes. Some people have said yes, got some, just getting ready to use it. But there was one answer that was no, but what makes it different to other products? And the thing that makes Arlon's SLX different to other products is that we don't use inhibitors in our product. This is a topographical adhesive solution. So there is under a microscope, if you were to look at the backside of the adhesive, it looks like a picture of the high Alps or the mountains around Queenstown. And the adhesive wets out over time, whereas other adhesive manufacturers and other manufacturers use something called an inhibitor to stop the item sticking, and then your activity with Squeegee changes the chemistry makeup of that adhesive as you lay it down. And what that gives us is the ability to reposition makes it easier to wrap with. And one thing that Cal might tackle with you is adhesive lines or something that's called sanding as well. So that's the difference between our product. And just Cal, so that you're aware as we roll on, one of the other questions was door sills at some point during the morning.
Was what, sorry? Door sills?
Yeah, are we going to tackle door sills, or maybe some tips and hints of that? But I guess door sills can be somewhat handled like a deep recess, and you just need to understand where you're feeding in and where you're applying tension.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, bring that one. Remind me of that later on.
Yep, will do.
All right, Cohen, do you want to switch to the whiteboard camera? First camera change. I'm going to move over here. Hopefully you guys can see me all right here. So Neil's just explained and hopefully you can still hear me okay. Neil's explained the topographical, or just touched on the topographical adhesive. I'm just going to quickly show you what that looks like. So here, if you can see this little Flight Technology logo, anywhere that you see that, you'll be getting this topographical adhesive. So this refers to the texture in the adhesive, not the actual glue itself. So quickly, if this is our film and this is our substrate down here, can you guys see that okay? Is that coming through okay on the camera? So, excuse me. So at the moment,
that all looks good, Cal.
This mountain range that Neil was talking about, it sort of creates these peaks and troughs. So this is the glue here, and the point that's actually making contact with the surface initially is just the tips of these peaks. So that's what gives it its low initial tag, because the actual surface area of contact is really low to begin with. Once you start pushing down on it, you start flattening those peaks out, and the surface area starts increasing. So that's with a bit of pressure from your squeegee. Over time, and with the addition of heat, you can speed this up. It flattens out even more, and you get the idea. This is the process of wetting out. So then after it's reached its full bond, which can be as short as a few hours, it goes completely flat. So then it is wet out, as we say. So those peaks and troughs replace the need for inhibitors. I'll just quickly show you a very, very basic idea of inhibitors. I don't know what they actually are anymore. They were tiny little glass beads back in the day. I don't know if they've changed to a polymer now, but they're little beads that are embedded into the adhesive, and they create the first point of contact, which is what gives some of our competitors' films their slidability. What can happen though is, if you've ever seen little dots under your film, if you've ever had to drag it. In fact, if anybody has seen that or battled with sanding, these little dots that pop up when you're wrapping bonnets, they come up on ridge lines. Chuck a yes in the comment if you've had to deal with that. It's something that we had to deal with a lot back at Exotic, and it was just a nightmare. So that's when the inhibitors, if the film gets dragged left or right, these little beads can move out of place. They can move out of their little socket, and then they become what looks like a bit of sand. So sanding was a real problem, and I wish we'd got on to SLX and SLX Plus sooner, but we don't use inhibitors, so that's the main thing. Neil, did you just want to quickly talk to the specs, the microns and the laminates while I cameras again?
Yep. So obviously the SLX Plus is, so not obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, because this is the reason why we're all here to learn. It's a 10-year film, and we match that up with laminates as well. So, and it's a cast. We match it up with cast laminates. Also in the Flight family, we have a reflective product, which is called Illuminite, and that also has the Flight technology on that product. So that's a reflective. We've done some great installs with that. Gives customers a little bit of something different to make a wrap or a back door or a tailgate pop. But yeah, so SLX Plus, full partial wraps, compound curves, complex curves, 3D, deep recesses, There isn't anything on our vehicle that we wouldn't recommend you wrap, other than obviously low surface energy, things like, you know, plastic bumpers and things, rubber bumpers and things like that. So yeah, that's SLX Plus. And Dina, if you need a sample, if you need an A5 sample or a small sample, we can definitely work with Computer Letter to get you all out a sample. Ready to go, Cal, or do we need to?
No, that's great. That's great. I just wanted to cover off that. So now I've just moved a couple of cameras. So hopefully between this front one and this side one, you guys can get a relatively good view of the quickly cover off cleaning. Our official line is that you should clean with isopropyl alcohol as your final clean. I don't mind if you guys use other products in the beginning. If you've got your preferred cleaner, there's a few out there. You can use that as the very final clean. So that's just an important thing I wanted to note. Another thing I'm going to use here, which I just want to show you guys, if you don't already use tack rags, these are one of my favorite and most basic sort of tools. These tack rags they're just that picks up dust off the panel. If you guys haven't used them before, you can get these off eBay. They're a couple dollars each. They come in like packs of 20. They're worth their weight in gold. They last for ages if you look after them. I do recommend keeping them in a Ziploc bag because they will pick up dust and dirt if you drop them on the ground. So they're for automotive painting generally, and they are just great for taking any little bits of surface dust off the panel. So that's just covers off cleaning. Does anybody have any questions? Oh yeah, use them for laminating. Perfect. They're really great for laminating. Any questions before I move on to?
No questions on cleaning, Cal. One of the things we say at all the training sessions is the reason we cover it first because it is the most important thing. That's right. I'm sure everybody in the industry knows that, but you know it's one of those shortcuts that sometimes gets taken that can lead to major problems later on. So
yeah, 100% most important. If anybody says post heating is the most important, it's not. Cleaning is, and then post heating, in my opinion. Yeah. So you may have noticed there was a piece of vinyl down here on the door here, which I'm just going to remove. So I put this on first thing this morning, and I left half the backing on so that I can show you guys here. Now I'm going to go into this camera. Hopefully this picks up. No, I'm going to use the handheld here, Colin. Now, can you guys see on the right-hand side is the adhesive where I've just pulled off the backing. So you see how it's got that matte texture, and on the other side, it was stuck to the panel for a few hours. You can see how much shinier it is. So that is a visual representation of the film on the left has started the wet out process. Is that coming through okay, or is it a bit bright?
Yeah, no, we can see the glossier part that's been applied.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I really like this as a very basic demo. You guys can do this as well. Put a piece half on, leave the backing on the other half, leave it overnight, leave it for a couple of days, and then check it again. I'd also like this because it shows people that the adhesive does do what we say it's going to do. Some people that, you know, maybe they use it for the first time and it doesn't bite on as aggressively as some of the films they're used to, and they think, oh, I'm not sure about this, but it does get to its full bond. It just takes longer to get there. And that's very intentional. It gives you more workability. It gives you more time to work with the film. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions on that, feel free to ask. I'm just going to start now by sticking a bit of SLX Plus on. So can you guys see? Oh yeah, that looks okay. So I've got this backing off and I'm completely pushing that onto the panel, and I can slide that around. It floats over the surface. If I just touch it and let it tack a couple of times, you can see that it, I don't know if you can hear that okay. So you can see that it is really easy to remove. But as I start, if it just gets a couple more points of contact, you hear that sound coming through on the mic. It does start to want to grab. So in the initial stages, you've got time to work with it to get it into position. And again, sliding it like this, there's no risk of sanding. So with some of the other films I've used in the past, if you were to lay a panel on here and move it, well, that would be a big no-no. We knew not to drag the films because it could create that sanding. So then I'll just very, very lightly apply this piece. And you can see already, you can hear that sound. That's always a good sound if it's making quite a lot of noise coming off. So for anybody that had used the previous SLX, the original SLX cast wrap, and if you've also tried SLX Plus, you should notice there's quite a difference now. We did increase the adhesive, the level of adhesion, which is one of the major differences between original SLX and SLX Plus. So see that it really does want to grab on. That's using virtually no pressure as well, and obviously no heat yet. So I just like to show that it should give you a lot of faith in this product. It really does grab on when the panel's nicely cleaned. So I'm going to now bring one of these cameras in.
So Cal, when you've tacking it down and you're repositioning it, there's no worry that you're going to wear that flight technology out whilst you're doing it.
That's right. No, there isn't. So you can do this over and over again, and I have through testing it. I've sort of applied it, lifted it, applied it. Over time, the only thing that will change is because you are starting the process of wetting out. The more you do this, the more it's going to grab, because those peaks and troughs that you saw will start flattening out. So the other thing that will happen is if you do this too many times, the air channels will start to collapse. So I do recommend to people squeegee well at the start, and make sure you apply it, get all your air bubbles out. Don't leave bubbles, and come back to them hours later. It's always good practice to apply, like the film isn't air release, using really good technique, and then if you need to rely on the air channels, you can. Definitely don't leave bubbles for hours and hours. Yes, Neil? Okay,
Carl. So just while you're moving on to the next, what you're next going to cover, just one question if you can answer. Do you need to use a bonding primer or something into deep recesses with this vinyl? And I know that you're going to be passionately answering that question.
No, you don't. In my opinion, there's only a few instances where you should ever use primer, and it's generally to do with if the surface that you're applying to is compromised. So if you are doing an old chalky van, in some of the recesses on a 10 or 20-year-old van, you'll all probably be able to picture that chalkiness. In an instance like that, if you were going to use a primer, it would be voiding all warranties anyway, if you're doing a van that old. On a nice new panel with good quality paint, there's no need for primer. If the film gets to the point where it requires primer, that means, in my opinion, that you're trying to stretch it too far. And I would be looking at other methods, potentially hiding a join and doing it in two pieces. So yeah, we don't want to use primer as a crutch to hold up, overstretched film, if that makes sense.
Okay, and just while you're moving on, I think you can squeegee and talk. I know you very well. Question from Mark: does it mean that you have to keep the material or the vehicle inside until it's wetted out? And when applying, or maybe you want to answer that one before we move on.
No, you don't need to keep it inside. It's by no means, you know, it's not going to fall off while you're waiting for it to wet out. As a good practice, I really like holding on to wraps overnight. I am a big fan of, if you've got major sort of graphics going on a car, if it's just door decals, that's different. But if you're wrapping partial wrap, half wrap, full wrap, I think it's really good practice to give it to them the day after you've finished, if possible. I know that isn't always possible because I know customers can be pretty demanding. They can want it by 4 o'clock, whatever day, and you can be, there's nothing worse than rushing to finish a job and then sending it out. Because you know, if you've missed anything in post heating, you know, it's just not a good practice. If you can keep it overnight, you check on it the next morning, it keeps the ball in your court. But no, you can finish the wrap, put it outside. There's no problem.
And treat it no different to any other wrap film that you'd be using. So there's no difference in using SLX with its flight technology to any other wrap film as far as when you put it out, when you leave it out for the customer. And another question is, when you apply and remove, like you've just been demonstrating, does it stretch quite a bit or not really?
No, very little, very, very little. If you were to, I mean, there's a window of time. The longer you leave the film on, the more that it bonds on, the more you risk stretching it as you pull it off. If, you know, I generally think if you're going to have to remove something or lift it, you're going to do it relatively quickly. And in that instance, no, I can still give that a short, sharp snap up and it will, you know, you can see we purposefully printed these grids, these squares, so that, you know, it'd be kind of obvious if anything distorted.
Okay. So
no, but yeah, good practice would be not to leave it, you know, don't do something, go away and have lunch and then come back and decide to remove it. Try to do any lifting or fixing of panels as quickly as possible. So any other questions on that or anything at all?
No, I think we should, if you're ready to move on to your next technique, I'm sure everybody's keen to see you on the tools and squeegees.
I'm just going to show you guys a couple of a bit of Squeegee Technique. Now I know this might seem, Squeegee Technique is generally considered basic, and I agree, but I like to show this because the way that I squeegee underpins everything that I do, and it is relevant in all my advanced wrapping as well. So for anybody that's met me or seen any of my videos or courses before, you might have heard me talk about the snowplow analogy. And that is, if the snowplow, I'm just going to zoom in on this camera. No, it's not going to let me. Okay, this is the blade of a snowplow. Hopefully you guys can see this. And it's driving along the road this way. The snow is going to hit it and be pushed down. So that's generally the angle that I'm thinking of. And then when I'm coming back this way, I need to flip the squeegee. I try to always go straight across. I'm just going to grab one of my textures. Do you guys call them vivids over there still? They were vivids when I was at school. I'm going to try to go straight across as much as possible, as opposed, what I don't want to do is go down, chop at it, which I see a lot of people doing. And there's nothing, you know, no judgment if that's how you've been shown. I see a lot of people sort of doing this. Now you can successfully get film on by doing that. And that's really credit to the films of today. They're pretty forgiving. They let you get away with a lot. Excuse me. But I prefer to, I guess, squeegee, like I said earlier, squeegee as though it's not an air release film. So this technique was developed when I first started. There weren't air release films. So we had to do this with Arlon 2100 and Avery 900. So you couldn't risk, if you did that, you would leave a big bubble in the middle. Does that show through?
Yeah.
Reflection? Yeah. So left and right, try to keep it straight. And if you do that the whole way along, you should see, can you see the bend there is nice and smooth? Just going to switch to the handheld there. Can you guys see that beautiful smooth line? So I'll show you again by doing it slightly differently. I'm just kind of going to do this a bit random here. Not trying to do anything in particular. So flick back to this camera here. Now, can you see, it's not crazy, but those little ripples there, they're not much now, but they can turn into creases further down the panel. And that's only in about 200 mil from where I started, and already I'm getting these little ripples. The more extreme version of that is, and what I see a lot of people doing is they'll come down at the sides. Now that is even, I haven't even gone as far. And can you see how rippled that is? Now, there's nothing to say that that's, not savable. I can still work with the film and fix that, but in my opinion, that's not, you're fighting against the film. I would much rather use a more thoughtful technique and have the film do what I want it to do rather than sort of fighting with these ripples. I could absolutely pull out the heat gun and relax that and get this all down, but I would just rather it be easy. I don't want the film to fight me. So I'll just see, let's see if I can. If I revert back to a good technique, actually, I can sort of smooth that back out pretty well. But if I was to keep doing that, and I'm exaggerating slightly here, you can see it's, there's already a little bit where it wants to pull back up. So I'm going to do this panel, I guess, with good technique, and I'll show you on the other one. If I do close off the sides, see how easily, I mean, I'm obviously doing this on purpose, but see how I can create this big pocket with a film. Now I can get my hand in behind there. That's how much film is bunched up. So that just shows the control that I have with the squeegee. Whereas on the other one, if I was to seal off the sides, that middle is still really nice and flat to the panel. There's no give in there. I can't get my hand behind there. I'd have to stretch the film. So Squeegee Technique can either create massive amounts of excess vinyl, or it can keep the vinyl really nice and flat. So does that make sense? Does anybody kind of battle with film when they are applying it? Or,
Pop your comments in the sidebar on the chat. Cal, I should know the answer to this, but do we have any videos on our Rapid Right about squeegee techniques yet?
That's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Okay, so we'll double check that. But just while you're transitioning to your next piece, then rapidright.com is also a place where your videos and training videos are hosted as well. So please try and pop on there if you get 5 minutes during lockdown.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to quickly show you one more thing here. Now this was the extreme version of me trapping vinyl. I'm going to show you the opposite of that really quickly. And if I really, I guess, do an overly exaggerated technique of the sort of the proper technique, I can actually send so much of the vinyl out sideways that it starts to, I guess, pucker is the best word for it. Can you see how the film is actually sitting up here on its own? So it's started to get a bend in it that pulls itself back off the vinyl. And if I push it down, it's got this sort of ripple. That is the opposite of this. Okay, so that's just, I just want you to keep that in mind because that's going to become really relevant when I move over to the Mazda guard. So any other questions on Squeegee before I move on to deep recesses?
Not so far, Cal.
Okay.
Just a couple of, well, whilst you're moving on to deep recesses, yeah, you mentioned the tack pads. Computer Letter do in fact sell the tack pads, so no need to. That's all right. It's all right. Good. It's all good. Dina put us right on that. What sort of squeegees and buffers do you prefer, and do you use any lube? And this is regarding wraps, Cal. Do you use any lubes to apply or minimising scratching the film?
Okay, firstly, the squeegees that I use predominantly are these. I love these white Arlon Lidco squeegees. They're American made. But I also love the Yellow Tools range. I've got a lot of Yellow Tools stuff. But really, squeegees come down to personal preference. Whatever feels most comfortable for you is generally the right squeegee. I do like these really soft microfiber buffers, but they wear through a bit quicker. Some people prefer a more sturdy buffer. There's trade-offs. The softer they are, the quicker they wear out generally. Application lubricant, I will occasionally use a bit of soapy water on the outside, but a lot of the time I don't. I will, another good thing to do with the tack rags is to wipe over the face of the film prior to applying. So maybe you've got your whole print magneted onto the side of the van. You've already tack ragged the panel before it went on, but while it's up there, you can just wipe over the face. It's quite common for things to get stuck to the laminate when it's coming off the production bench. Just atmospheric dust can settle on the lam. Then you go to squeegee and you're basically dragging all those little bits over the laminate, which is generally what scratches. So the cleaner the face of the print film is, the less scratching you'll get as well.
Okay. And another question whilst we're on squeegee techniques. When applying large pieces of vinyl, should you start squeegeeing from the middle of the film or from one edge or corner?
That's a really good question. It changes depending on what you're doing. Middle, for most panels, I would say the middle, but not always. If you've got exit points everywhere, so say if it's a bonnet, definitely the middle, because you can go either left or right. If it's a partial wrap on the side of a van, you may not be able to start in the middle. You may have to start at the top, back corner and work your way down and across, depending on the direction or the angle. If you're doing a stripe, you may start one side and work to the other. Yeah, it's a really good question. There's no exact answer to that, but starting in the middle is if you can access both sides and lift every side up, as in, I would start in the middle here because I can lift this side, I can lift this side to get to it. I hope that answers the question. I'll try to think of that as we're going along, if there's anything that...
Okay. All right. I think that's it for questions on... Oh, just one. I mean, you can move on to... I think you're going to recesses next, but and you can, might be able to answer this on the go. Is can you use car polishes on top of this film and laminate?
Can you use what, sorry?
Car polish.
Car polish. I don't like using polishes on top of films. Look, if you've wrapped an entire panel edge to edge, I don't really have a concern with using a polish. If there's anywhere where there's an edge of the vinyl, an overlap or text, I just don't like polish being anywhere near the adhesive, really, and that includes the side edge of the film. So even though the film might be nicely applied, you know, I just get nervous that polish is going to work its way under an edge. So I avoid it. I don't know what our official position is actually, Neil, but I think
Well,
we say
obviously, keeping a vehicle clean and tidy with wax, you know, just normal washing should mean that you don't need to polish it.
Yeah.
And really, polishing in itself, that word polishing has, you know, bits and pieces in it designed to, you know, take surfaces off,
hydrophobic and
paint.
stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would do tests as well, but if you've got a bonnet wrap, I would be happy to put polish on the middle of a nice flat panel that's wrapped edge to edge.
Cool. So
Okay.
we're moving to. Sorry, yeah, Cal.
No, we are. I'm gonna, Helen, do you want to flick back to? Sorry, I'm doing circles here. Flick back to the whiteboard.
To your whiteboard.
Now, I'm just going to show you a real quick diagram of a recess and sort of the correct, or my preferred way to do a recess and where to direct the heat. So let's just say this is the top corner. This is a side-on view. This is a Mercedes Sprinter. So it just has one recess. It goes in and then it's flat, and then obviously down below it comes back out. Now that is not what we have here. The eyelid is much more complex, but I'm going to just quickly show you on this. Switch to another color here. So hopefully you can see this blue as well. Now if I apply the film over the high point, over the outside bit of the recess, and I've applied it in the middle, I'm left with this gap here. And I refer to that as the vinyl is bridged. I don't know if that's what you guys say, but I like that term. It's bridged across that recess. The way that I was originally shown, this is going back many years, I was shown to point the heat gun. This is the heat gun. Blast air at the hot part. At the deepest part, I guess. Soften that bit of vinyl and then push it in. And at the time that made perfect sense because, you know, that was the bit that needed to stretch. So of course, why wouldn't you heat that bit? It just made perfect sense. Does anybody, just you can write as I'm talking, does anybody still do this, or was anybody shown this way, heating up the actual bit that's getting pushed in? There's no judgment because I still come across a lot of people that do that. I've found, well, not I've found, there has since been sort of learned there's a better way. And that's to direct the heat away from the part that's actually stretching in. So if the film's bridged like that, I would try to aim the heat down here.
Somebody said yes, but I will think I will change in the next few minutes. So that's our work here is done. Thank you, Rory.
Look, it's one of those things that some people, you know, if they're already doing this technique, might be thinking, oh yeah, that's basic. We learned that ages ago. It's not common knowledge, and I still find people that swear black and blue to heat the deepest part. So again, no judgment, but this I've found in experience works a lot better. So heating the vinyl away from the recess allows it to stretch. I hope this is coming through okay on the camera. Allows it to stretch there rather than there. So then once it goes in, this part here hasn't heated up and hasn't stretched. But the vinyl has grown a little bit here to allow it to go into there. Does that make sense? I hope I've explained that well. So that's the basic theory. Angle the heat away from the area that's going to be under the most tension. Because here is the deepest part. This part, I want to have the best possible bond right there. And if that's stretched, there's two things that happen if that's stretched. There's less adhesive because you've had to literally stretch it apart. And the film is going to be trying to shrink back. Obviously, you're going to post heat, but still, you've stretched it. It's going to want to return to its original shape. So that's why you might see popping in deep recesses. Everybody's probably seen recesses pop. Even when you do them with the absolute perfect technique, there's always still risks that things are going to pop out or fail just due to the nature.
So we're just essentially managing tension away from the area of most stress.
Exactly. Yeah. So now on the eye load, it's not that simple because it goes in again, and then back out. And then down to the next one. So here, if I was to, I'll show you on the actual panel, if I was to bridge across, I can't really direct the heat down here too much. Well, I can to get this corner up top really well done. So I could wrap this in here. But then what I've done is I've stretched this film and it's still got another recess to go into. So eyelids are really, really tricky. There's no getting around it. Eyelids and Dina mentioned you guys have LDVs over there. They're bad as well. They don't have as many recesses, they don't go in and out, but their deep channel is deep and it's closer together, which is just, yeah, it's a nightmare. So I'm not going to pretend that there's a way that you could do these that makes them perfectly easy. Eyelids are just hard. I do have a couple tips for how to, which I'll show you. Actually, I'll just draw it quickly here so it sort of makes sense while I'm doing it. First thing I'll try to do is before the film has grabbed in the middle, before it's stuck here, and you've got to work pretty quickly, I'll start trying to roll this edge over just with my thumb before using any heat. Now this is important. It doesn't necessarily look like it does a lot, but trust me, it really, really helps. So by pushing this edge over with your thumb as much as possible, you might only get 2-3 mil, but that all helps. It is a game of millimeters. So the further you can get it in before you start heating, the better. Then I will sort of warm up the whole area to try to spread the stretch out as much as possible, but there will come a point where it's going to start tacking onto this point here, this corner here. Then I'm going to, rather than apply this top recess really well and then have to stretch both of those, I'll bridge it, hit that point there, so that I do stretch some of this recess does have to get a bit of stretch from here. And then when this one goes in, it obviously, of course, has to stretch a little bit as well. But I didn't steal all the stretch at the beginning with the first recess. That may not, that's a lot of talking. I'm going to show you on the actual panel. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to flick back.
Whilst you're moving, Cal, a question was, how far can you stretch this vinyl and what's its limits? I think probably what we would say there is that we never ever want to approach any film's limits on stretch, because that's just, the more you stretch it, the more problems you're introducing to the film, yeah?
Yeah, I don't like getting anywhere near the film's limit. I think, you know, the general rule that people talk about is 30%. That's actually quite a lot. When you know, actually, if you measure a recess sort of point to point and then measure it again going in and out, 30% is actually quite a lot of stretch. So I try not to ever get it to near its limit. But you'll know, you know, if you're seeing any color dropping out, it's too far. It's hands down too far. So I wouldn't, if it's fading, if you wrap a recess, it fades, color drops out, you may be able to post heat it and it may stay in there, but in my opinion, that's gone too far. And that's sort of just asking, you know, for trouble, asking for.
We should never be approaching the limits of our films when we're wrapping, is essentially what we're saying. Yeah. If you're doing that, then.
So quick, these are a really complex panel. I'm going to just quickly touch on a few options, but then I'm just going to show you the traditional way to wrap it in one piece. But I do have ways to wrap this in two pieces with a join. It's more of a color change technique, but it is applicable if you're doing a digital print with a solid color. So I'll explain as we go along. Yeah, first I'll just wrap it normally. I'll just wrap a corner in the sort of normal technique, and then we'll move on from there.
May I ask, is the iLoad popular in New Zealand, or is the LDV gaining a lot of traction because of obviously a cost?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and somebody actually mentioned about paint. Yeah, for sure. Some of these vehicles, because obviously they're commercial vehicles built to a price, sometimes paint thickness is not the same. Paint adhesion is not the same in everywhere. So that's always another reason why these good techniques will help you avoid some of these problems. So yeah, LDV is becoming popular, the most popular in the South Island. Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
So the LDV has, whilst it has deeper channels, it doesn't have this double bump that you've kind of set up to show us here now, Cal. Yeah. Yeah,
it doesn't have the extra recess, but the in and out that it does have is really close together. Yeah. So yeah. And when I move on to the joining technique, which I will show you, that applies for LDVs as well. In fact, it can be used on any vinyl, any van with a recess like this. Can you go to the side view, Callum? I just want to check. Yeah, I'll just adjust this down a bit. Okay, I'm just going to focus on this corner. It's a bit hard to sort of show you in depth on the whole panel at once. I'll start on the corner, and then I can do a bigger bit from there. Is that lighting okay? I'll just adjust these.
It's all looking good, Cal. We're not Channel 9, and just remind everybody that Cal is in lockdown exactly the same as you guys in New Zealand, and he's built this this studio in his back garden. Not sure his wife's too happy of taking up some of the garden, but yeah, he's doing an awesome job.
She's happy that I'm out of the house. Yeah. So no, it's definitely a positive. So first thing you can see here is there is this sort of recess here, and not to be tricked by this point here, we do want the flat part of the vinyl to be up to there. So if I was just to bridge the film like this and start applying down low, you guys can see that reflection there. I still then, if I do that, I've got to wrap the film to get to that recess before I even start. So I don't want to bridge onto that bottom bit. I want to relax it in so that it starts its life on that highlight there. Hopefully that comes through on the camera. So I'm starting on the outside in this demo. Now I do have the extreme benefit of being able to hold that corner, and I know that is not realistic for wrapping most panels. Well, actually, that's not true. Sometimes if you're doing a partial wrap, say if you know the wrap comes down like this, goes that way. Hopefully you can see.
Yeah, you'd have an edge to work with, yeah?
Yeah, if the wrap came down like this, which is sort of a common 3/4 wrap or a partial wrap, then you can, I'll just trim that as if I've done that. Then you can sort of, let's just pretend that's the edge of the print. So if I'm lucky enough to have that, then I can hold this hand in and help apply this recess. So that thing I said before, using your thumb to roll the film in as much as you can before you even start. That's what I'm doing there. Can you guys, yeah, you can see it's just starting to go around that edge. And again, it doesn't seem like a huge deal at the moment, but every millimeter that you wrap without heat helps. So now I'm going to introduce a little bit of heat. I'm just really going to soften the whole thing at this point. And this, you'll see that I heat and then take the heat away and let it cool again. So that heat there was not to introduce a huge amount of stretch, it was really just to relax it. Just to get a couple more mil on that first roll around that recess.
Just FYI, Cal, what's the temperature down there this morning? I think it's going to be unusual for Melbourne, but it's quite warm this morning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still a bit warm. It was warm yesterday. I think it's going to drop today, but it feels like it might be 18 or something at the moment. It's a bit muggy inside the shed here with all the computers running, but generally, I mean, the technique doesn't change. I still do the exact same thing no matter what the conditions. You just do need to add a bit more heat, obviously, when it's colder. But yeah, I saw someone say the good old Azitos. I swear by these things. They're just such great value for money, and they do seem to last forever. But for something like this, I'll use high heat at low fan a lot of the time, so I'm not blasting it too much. So the next bit of heat, I'm gonna focus away from here. So I'm gonna aim for roughly 100 mil away. Now I'm aware that that is on another recess, but at the moment I'm not worried about that. This just shows me roughly where I want to direct the heat away.
And the application heat temperatures for this product, they're recommended. So it's recommended between 10 degrees and 33. Now, obviously recommended is ideal world. You know, it will operate lower than 10 degrees, but the lower the temperature of your workshop, the more difficult everything becomes, I guess. You know, films become a little bit more less relaxed under those cold temperatures. But the adhesive in SLX Plus has been adjusted to make the application temperatures wider than before.
Yeah, and I do recommend, if you can, if it is a cold morning, I do like to preheat any panel that I'm going to work on, not so that it's hot when I'm applying, but just so that it takes the chill off. So if I'm doing a recess on an eye load and it's cold, I will blast the recess first. Full heat, full fan. Get that nice and warm. Then I'll, put the heat gun down, go away and get the print, come back. By the time you actually apply, you don't want it to be still hot, but it should be, lukewarm or room temperature. And it makes a huge difference to have it just at a nice ambient temperature as opposed to 2 degrees if it's just come in from outside. So preheating or taking the chill off is a massive thing for recesses.
Yep.
So I'm going to just continue on. So I'm going to again direct the heat away. I'm not going to wrap this first recess all the way in, but I'm probably past halfway. Yeah, you can see there most of the way in. Now, I don't want this top line, this line here, to stretch too much. So if I were to just keep this film off and work my way in, what it's going to do is it's going to go in, across, out, across. And what will happen is this point, that line will end up dropping somewhat because of all the film that I've given to that. So I don't want to do that too much. That can happen. You will probably all be aware of when you do, I'll just move the camera up.
One question, we should have covered that off. Is that wrap, what laminate are you using? Have we got that test sample with?
This is, oh yeah, good question. This is 3210.
So this is a 35 micron film.
35
available,
micron PVC
available gloss or matte. And then the other product that we recommend is a 50 micron film, which is 3270. So there's gloss, matte, and satin in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Greg.
Very good question. So you guys might have seen, if you've ever had to do a stripe across a recess, that it will go up and then it will sometimes dip down in the recess, and you'll get these horrible wavy lines. Is everybody familiar? Yeah, matte isn't available in 3210 yet. Thanks for that.
My bad.
That dipping in here is basically because the film's had to stretch in and it's pulled that line. So I'm conscious of that. I don't want to distort this top line too much. So I'm now going to hit it onto that inside recess. And I'm purposefully actually pushing it onto half, you know, I'm not just hitting it dead on the face. I'm getting my fingertip round and under so that as I apply it, I'm going a mil into the recess right off the first push. So again, may not seem like much, but that millimeter that I've got it into there all helps add up. So I'm now going to just relax this middle bit. I'll just quickly apply this. We've now set this in place. And again, I want to use using my Snowplow to spread this film out. So I know I did a really jagged cut to begin with, but hopefully if you do that technique nicely, you'll retain a nice smooth line. So now I've got the film halfway in the first recess, a few mil on the next recess. Now you kind of have to, this is where eyelids, you can't heat every recess perfectly. There is going to be some stretch across all of them, just because of the nature of the shape. So I'm going to warm it all. Then I'm going to bridge to the next recess. And the reason I've bridged it there is because I've already heated a lot of the way in the first recess. I know that the amount that it has to stretch in here is not very much. And I want to allow the most remaining stretch I can for these two bits here. So I'm going to start in the corner here. I'm just going to soften this whole bit. I'll deal with this outside part of the recess first. And I'm always going to work from this side inwards. And that's not even hot at the moment. That just pushes in with virtually no heat. Again, I'll just warm this just to soften it. So that's the first recess dealt with. The outer recess is done. Now I've got the two others. The one that I like to do next is the inside one first, because it's not as deep, but it's a bit sharper. So now I will switch sides. I will heat away from this side to wrap this in. So I'm going to heat on the outside first, well, from about halfway down to get this recess, and then I'll flip it and do the opposite. So just directing the heat to that other side. Actually, I'm going to warm the whole thing and let it sort of settle out, let those ripples go, and then let it cool. So because I have heated that up a lot more than I normally would, I'm just going to let that cool. It's pretty good there. Now, just thumb that edge to make sure it's nice and smooth. And now I can start pressing in on this side. And you'll see as that's pushed in by a millimeter, it's pulled all that tension, all those little ripples that were there. It's sort of tension goes back out. Right, again, pointing the heat away from that first recess. And you just want to take your time. I find there's no point in rushing the recess because it's sort of one of the most critical parts. Now I'm going to bring my focus mainly to the corner. I want to start getting this part all the way down to the valley or the deepest part of the recess, and then I'll work up and out. So I'm actually going to use my squeegee for this. I'll bring the camera around. Oh, and of course, the corner is a black piece of vinyl, so it may not be as obvious, but you'll see in a second. Now I'm going to actually use the tip of the squeegee here with the felt, the microfiber buffer. I'm just going to gently work that down. What I do not want to happen is I do not want it to touch anywhere in the middle first, because what that'll do is it'll create a bridge prematurely, and it'll steal vinyl that I had to stretch with. At the moment, I've got this 60 odd mil, 70 mil, 60 mil to borrow from. If it tacks in the middle, I've essentially got two areas of 20 mil. And then the stretch is increased. So very carefully pushing down. All right, I can feel that I've hit the valley there. I'll just grab the handheld Colin. Can you guys see? Let's try and catch the light. Yeah. So just there, you can see it's wrapped all the way into the valley, but it's not touching anywhere from there to there. So when I go to do this side, I still have all of that vinyl to borrow from, if you will. So now that I've got that deepest part of the valley, I'll work up and out. And now I've essentially separated it. So I'm only going to deal with the top section first. So I'll just go from the corner upwards. Again, I'm going to just help that in. The corner itself is always sort of the bit that you want to get right. Once you start getting up onto the flat section, it gets a bit easier. And I'll sort of use the squeegee in a bit of a sort of, not slicing, but the way scissors, the way the blades come together on scissors, if you rotate your squeegee like that, the point of contact, I'm not moving my squeegee, but as I push it in, the point of contact goes up. That makes sense. So then I'll sort of give it a bit more heat. And again, the heat's always pointed to the opposite side from the side that I'm pushing in. The reason I do like to use a squeegee when I'm doing these inner parts of the recess is that that little corner is sharp, and it's sharper than really the shape of your fingertip. So sometimes you can push on that and feel like you've got it all the way in, but you might, see that there's a tiny little row of bubble, which is basically the start of it popping. So I want to avoid that at all costs. So now I've gone up. Now I can come back to doing the same on the bottom edge. Is this still visible, Neil? You can still sort of see this all right?
Yeah, as you say, that black, it's just unfortunate that the black's the colour in the corner, because the white corner is very visible, but the black's not, sorry.
I'll do a close-up on this once I've finished, and you'll see it on the other side as well. So again, I'm doing that. I'll sort of pivot the corner and push in rather than going like that. All right, I'll bring the handheld up again. So now you can see that bottom or that inner recess is completely wrapped in, but I've stopped, it's only gone 3-4 mil onto the flat. When I do that push with my fingertip, I really barely want to push onto this flat. Again, because if my thumb or finger pushes out to here, all I'm doing is stealing vinyl to help me stretch into this bottom one. So you can see that. Inner one's all done. The outer one's all done. We did that first. Only one remaining is this middle one. So I'll go back to, and this one is relatively, compared to that inner one, it's a bit easier because it's not as sharp. So now,
Cal, as you move on can I just put in your head a couple of questions? Is the technique the same piece? Is the technique the same when doing that panel in one piece? I think probably you covered that earlier on with holding the edges, but and then the other one was, would you expect the longevity of the film to be compromised in these recesses compared to, say, a flat panel based upon proper application techniques?
Okay, two good questions. The first question, yes, this technique basically stays exactly the same when I'm doing these panels in one piece. And you don't have the advantage of holding it here, but I'll show you what that looks like with one big piece. But yeah, the technique stays the same in that I do as much of this outside one as I can, but not all of it. Then I'll tack to this side. Then I'll push in this recess to that point, then I'll heat that recess and finish on that one. So the order for me stays the same. The technique does alter slightly because you don't have your hand here, but otherwise it's very, very similar. The longevity, if you've done this, it's so hard to say if it's done perfectly or not, but I would think if it's done well, it shouldn't have any impact on the longevity. If you were to just yeah, you go now.
The techniques that Cal's demonstrating today is designed to give you and the film the best possible chances of staying in here in these recesses and not having challenges in those areas and not having panels pop and all the rest of it. So yeah, and obviously everything we do in the development of the films is around these are the challenges of wraps, and everything we do in the R&D department with the technical people like Cal, they're always testing this. This is what we do day in, day out to make these things stay down in these channels.
Yep, 100%. So hopefully that answers the question. So I'll quickly just wrap in the rest of this recess. So again, yeah, focusing on heating on this side to wrap into this side. And again, I'll start on the corner here first. And you can sort of tell by how much the film's moving under your thumb or finger as to how warm, how correct the temperature was. If it's really resisting you, if it's not pushing it at all, you probably need to add a bit more heat. If it goes in way too easily, you probably want to stop and let it cool down a bit. It might be a bit too warm. So again, add a bit more heat to that inside. Now this one I don't need to use the squeegee to get that corner in because it is a much more gentle curve. So you can see there, I've gone into the recess and now I'm on the flat. So now I can actually join those two bits together because they're both wrapped down to the flat. So now I've separated the recess. So I've given myself I can sort of pause and reset. Now I can go from here down and across and there upwards. Now I know if you're doing the whole panel, you can't do every corner like that. One corner has to be your start point and then you work the rest around. But where you can, where you've got 2 exit points, I do like to separate the corner. So I'll just quickly, you guys can see get the idea of the rest of this now. The other thing I would like to mention is I don't like to go all the way in one big push. Some people, I have seen some people try to get all the way down in one go. And I know I sort of finished off these bits, I guess you could say in one go, but the difference was I'd already wrapped in past halfway. So for something like this, I've probably got up here, I've got about halfway to go, but down here it's most of the way in. So down here I can push in, but I do want to flow my thumb out. I'm not going to try to get all of the vinyl up here in one go. I'd rather do a couple of passes, warm it again, a few more millimeters in. Rather have multiple goes at it and then finish so that the last push is only really pushing it in a couple of mil. So now I've got that recess in. The only thing that's left to do is to push the middle out. And it's always good to remember to do this because you may forget and leave a big line of bubbles in the middle. And then the last one is a bit quicker. Like that. Do this a couple of times. Okay, that one I can feel that's nice and ready to go. And so that was 2 squeegee stroke, 2 pushes with the fingertip to get that in. And then come back and make sure you smooth out all the middle. So any questions on that?
There's no questions on that specifically, Cal, but a couple of questions because I guess everybody's just moving along each stage. So a couple of questions around the silicone joins that are sometimes on these vans. What's your recommendation for that? So if you could tackle that one, and then the other one is, and I'm sure it's on your agenda to cover, is post heating, recommended temperatures, when to do it, etc.
Yep.
And
do
you use infrared? So silicone join maybe first.
All right, I'll talk about the silicone joins. Now I'm going to, my primary camera has shut itself off. So I'm going to bring this one around as my talking camera. Okay. So silicone joins on these vans are a nightmare. I don't know if they're on the Eyelids specifically. I know they're on
the new Eyelid. It is.
Oh, the new Eyelid, yeah. They're on the new high aces as well. I think there's a Renault where they're everywhere. They are a nightmare. If they're black silicone, exposed rubber, then generally I would stop short of those. So if this was is that Chronograph showing up all right?
Yep.
That was the silicone join or the rubber join. And depending on how much time or the value of the job, one way we used to do them at Exotic was we'd run knifeless tape down each side. And I'll actually just show you what I mean. So you can actually get
I'm sure another great product available from Computer Letter.
Yeah, love knifeless. Best invention in the industry, I think. So I'd run the knifeless tape down the edge with the filament or the string right next to the edge. So sometimes the inner piece of the string was, the inner side of the tape can be covering the silicone, so long as the string is still on the panel. So we did in the past do double knifeless tape on each side, and then basically cut the silicon out that way. We would sometimes wrap over it and then, you know, heat it in so we could see where the edges are, and then use a straight edge ruler or a little guide and hand cut them out. But generally I would always cut the black ones out. And I find if you do your cut really nicely, you may see a sliver of white on either side, but if you get those cuts really, really straight, it looks better than if you just wrap over it and then it pops out. The worst thing you can do, I guess, is to do a wavy cut and expose uneven amounts of the body color. So if you're going to do this where you either knifeless them out or trim them out, try and get the lines as straight as possible. I'm always a big believer in making things look like you meant to do it. So as long as that cut's nice, even if there's a sliver of body color, people will see it and they'll understand why you've done it. If it's wavy and all over the place, it looks like a mistake. So that's sort of silicon. Oh, if they're the painted ones, some of them have those really 3D, they bulge outwards, but they've been painted over. As long as they've been painted over, you know, if you can tuck the vinyl into it and not stretch too much, I would leave it on those. But they do vary. Some of them are so uneven that it's a nice smooth bead, I guess, and then it gets to the top and it triples. It's like they've added 3 or 4 times as much silicon at one point and it bulges out. And that can throw out the whole side of a wrap because it creates this protruding point that you need to wrap around. Does anybody, yeah, you guys have probably come across that sort of stuff.
Before you move on to post-heating, Cal, because a couple of other questions came back to that panel down there that you've done there. As we've obviously demonstrating on a small piece, by the way that you've wrapped that corner and you've been able to squeeze the air out both ends, yep. What would you do if you were wrapping the whole panel? Because obviously you need somewhere for that air to escape that channel as you go around. I think that's another great question as well.
Really good question. So why don't I just do that quickly? I'll put a whole piece on. I won't necessarily wrap every single bit all the way in, but I'll put a piece over the whole panel and you'll get the idea of what I'm doing. So,
all right. And a second part to that question from Paul is, you know, what if it was a full panel and you don't have the luxury of an open edge? What would happen at the meeting point when you're pushing into that second recess channel? I guess it's maybe that same question about where are you going to expel the air that's in that deep recess when you come to finish it off when you're doing a full piece on that van?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So look, this is where eyelids get a bit murky. I definitely don't like doing eyelids the whole van in one piece. I know sometimes it has to be done if it's a lower end job. I would always try to not upsell, but just tell people if they've got an eyelid or an LDV, you might need to set up the job differently and allow separate print. The rest of the van can be one piece, but do the sliding door as its own piece. Because then you can, you know, off the front, you can use the bleed, the excess vinyl off the front, and the excess vinyl at the back, you can deal with those parts, and then the door itself gets its own piece. And I think, yeah, these are well within 1500, so you can do a vertical drop. That would be my preferred, because that means each panel can be done separately, and you can use, you know, on the back panel of the van, it's a bit different. Obviously, it's got the sliding door track. There's a whole raft of other complications with that. But I would generally, you know, on that corner, you can leave the whole back of the back corner off, basically. So,
right. So you're leaving yourself somewhere to channel the air before you finally do that last corner.
Yes, and it's easier said than done, because as you go in, the film starts to grab and creates another bubble. So another thing that you can do is use, just grab my wrap tools. So these are just a couple of the sort of tucking tools that I use from Yellow Tools, but Avery do make their red and blue, I think they're called the Flex 6 or something like that. These are great for just leaving a bit of a channel. You can use a straw if anybody still has plastic straws. I know we're supposed to be phasing those out, but they're really handy. I like to stick, and the cool thing about these is that they're magnetic. So I'll stick that sort of there prior to starting the wrap. And then once I start to apply the vinyl, I can sort of bridge it right across. You guys, is this in frame?
Yep.
And then this will sort of stick up like that. The vinyl will be tacked just there, but then the rest of it is just sort of hanging in midair. And just a little tiny bit of air created by that is enough to send the air out. I have seen people get creative. We used to use a bit of backing paper and you roll it with the silicon side out and make a little cone, a little trumpet shape and stick that in. That did the job. Basically anything that's non-stick or that isn't going to transfer something onto the vinyl. I will say if you use tools like this, give them a clean first. I have seen people pick these up off the ground and use them, and then it'll leave a big line of dirt and dust on it. So I'll show you that in a second. I'll cover, and stop me if I miss something there, Neil, but I'll cover off post heating while I've got this little bit on, and then I'll show you with the full size piece. So here. Yep, that one there. Okay. Grab my temp gauge. Now, hopefully you guys all use temp gauges. If you want to type a yes or no, and probably you'll say yes, even if you don't, I'm guessing. You should all use.
So that was a question, do you use infrared thermometer? And Computer Letter responded, they sell a Cobra infrared thermometer. So yeah, speak to those guys if you haven't got one. And as you say, it's one of those pieces of kit. If you don't have it, you're probably not able to do wrapping to the highest level. I'm sure most people have got one anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, a couple of the shops that I went to when I was in Auckland earlier in the year, you know, they knew that they should be using temp gauges, but their boss hadn't bought them any. They didn't have them. They would just go by touch. You could be getting it right every time. You may have a really good sense of what 95 degrees is in your fingertip, but I can tell you, so that's the temperature we want to get to is 95. But if it is 95, it is absolutely going to hurt. It's really going to hurt to be always touching 95 degrees as a way of testing. So generally people don't get to 95, they get to 75 and go, yep, and that still feels really hot. And they think that's enough. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I still don't want to be finding out 95 by touch. I want this temp gauge to tell me. So I'm going to just show you here. I'll just heat part of this and work my way up. But this is exactly how I would heat this. I work in sections of about 200 or 300 mil. So full heat, full fan. It's important when you've got the fan up and the heat all the way up to keep the heat gun moving. You don't want to just point in one spot and let it get to 95 because it will speed up way too quickly. In my preferred technique, everybody's got something different. I like to do sort of small circles and then work my way up and down like that. Other people may want to do left and right, up and down. It really doesn't matter, whatever feels comfortable as long as it's moving. So I'm going to heat this section here with that 300 mil up and down. Now I just want to build the heat up relatively slowly. That's at 65 degrees now. $75. $85.
Now, earlier a question, Cal, was when do you like to post heat? And I think I answered because I know it's kind of your mantra. You like to post heat every panel as you go rather than think about doing it at the end of the vehicle. And the reason is because, as what I can see now is you're paying particular attention to it. And if you have to post heat the whole vehicle, then it becomes a chore and your wrist will be finished by 2 panels.
Yeah, that's a pretty good assessment. So There's a few reasons why I like to do panel by panel. And this is from the, let's assume you're a one-person operation, as in you do the whole cleaning, you do the wrap, and you do the post-heat. You may be lucky enough, and we were at Exotic, that we had a team of people. Sometimes we could wrap and then let the junior do the post-heat. We didn't have to do it. If you've got that set up, that's great. But if I'm doing the post-heating on my own, I don't want to leave it all to the end, because it just sucks to have to post-heat a whole van in one go. I would rather wrap this whole panel, post-heat it, and move on. And I know it's done, and I'm on to the next one. So the novelty wears off really quickly at post-heating. Part of the risk there is that you'll get bored of it, your hand gets sore, fatigued, and you start cutting corners subconsciously. Instead of getting it to 95, you go, oh, that'll do. You'll skim past parts, especially if you've got the client banging on the door trying to pick the van up. Another reason why I like to keep it overnight. Don't rush the post-heat. Another reason I like to post-heat after I do each panel is because if you have missed any sections, you've left a little air bubble. The first part of the post-heat, when I first go over it, just like that, if there is any pockets of air, they're going to expand and make themselves obvious to me. And I want to deal with them quickly. If I've wrapped this whole panel, it's taken me, whatever, between an hour, 45 minutes, let's say, and then I pause, go get a coffee, come back to post-heat it. There's still time with the air channels, there's still time to push bubbles out if I've found any. If I wrap the entire rest of the van, then come back to post-heat and there's a bubble, there's a good chance that bubble is going to be sealed off because the vinyl, the adhesive has continued to wet out, channels are all closed. So it's another good reason why doing panels, as post-heating them as you wrap them, it's just good practice. You don't have to do it, but by far it's my recommended way to do it. So I got that to 100 degrees there prior to stopping to chat. And then I would just, the beauty of doing this in sections like this, once you get 200 or 300 mils to 100 degrees, you'll find that the next 300 mils is already at 60, 70 degrees because the heat will flow out. So starting always takes a bit longer, and then as you go, it gets progressively easier because the whole panel starts sort of pre-warming ahead of where you're going. But I'll warm the whole thing up like this. Once it's at temperature, I will go along and press in again, but I don't want to drag too much. I don't want too much friction. If you have one of those hard rubber wheels, you can use that at this point. I don't use them to wrap, but I do use them for post-heating. I just don't have one on hand, unfortunately. But it just helps give extra pressure in that deepest recess. Does that make sense? Has anybody got any post-heating questions before I move on to the bigger piece here? How are we doing for time as well?
Oh, we're seriously over time, but that's the good thing is, Cal, that everybody seems to be engaged. And one of the things about this recording, we have recorded this today, and I believe Computer Letter will make it available. But this is the first. If hopefully you guys are going to be out of lockdown soon, but we are more than happy to come back and cover some of the topics that we haven't covered today. So yeah, we will definitely redo this. We will definitely do some more in the future. So Cal, yeah, no more specific questions on that. I think there's one from Bruno, but I think we might just have to dive into what he means there. But you were going to cover up the full panel. You were going to start. Yeah,
I'll do that quickly, and then maybe we'll move on to a door handle or something like that.
Yeah,
right.
And earlier there was the question about door sills as well. And again, if we don't get a chance to answer that here today, we have got the details. Any questions that we haven't answered, we'll trawl back through this, and we'll definitely get Cal to give you guys contact and discuss this again. And we will be doing this in the near future with Computer Letter. So Cal's going to move on to doing a full panel now, aren't you, Cal? With the full, or
Well,
certainly
full coverage.
Full coverage, yeah.
I might speed through some of the, not wrap every single.
So before it, but it is, I know we've still got time, but perhaps anybody would like to type in the comments or the questions what they would like us to cover in future episodes of this. That would be really good. And I know we're here for vehicle wraps, and that's maybe what everybody is doing a lot of, but we're also happy to talk about windows, walls, floors, anything you have, let us know. So yeah, if you've got any more specifics, topics that you'd like Cal to cover in the future, we'd be more than happy to tackle those in future events.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I stressed that I wanted to hear from you guys. I want to be able to target the questions that you guys have. So that will help formulate the next one, for sure. So
computer, just put the link up in the chat bar, so you can find the link to Lockdown Learning, where this video will be available. Lisa, unfortunately, no, we do not do PPF films.
Yeah, that's a whole nother beast. So I'm just going to rip the backing off this. Colin, you might want to go to the side camera, the other one. So I've got that little tool up there. And I'm just going to tack this on because I can. One of the beauties of our flight technology is that I can just tack the film like that to help me take the backing off.
Just talk about that backing. It's for most people it's the first piece they throw away, but actually it's a very important part of the construction of films, and the way that it releases is also important, especially as you move to summer months when it's a bit warmer. If you've got a tight release with a pattern that Cal's just got there, if you had something that kind of needs a bit of energy to take it off, you can actually start by stretching the film even before you've got it on the vehicle. So easy release is part of a good, well-designed product.
Absolutely, yeah. The release on it is beautiful. So, okay, so we've got the whole panel just draped on there. And you can see I've got the little tuck tool up there. So I'm just going to hit across the top just to give me a starting point, and I'm going to reset this here. And you want to work relatively quickly when you're working with a panel like this, because I don't want it to tack to the middle too quickly. So I'm going to see how.
So Jeff in the comments has said, do you post heat in flat panels? And I think we always say yes, Cal, because it helps promote the wetting out process of the adhesive. So yeah. So
not to 95 though.
No, but we want to give it a shot of heat across the flat areas where we haven't done any stretching. Yeah?
Exactly. So I talk about that more as a post warm. And our recommendation, I believe, is 20 to 30 degrees above whatever temperature it is. Yeah. So getting into
Miles has asked, can you touch on the laser technique? But I think probably that the time is going. We may not get to. And I think the technique, laser technique, is talking about the alignment of the graphics. So I think we may have to come back to that one, Cal, won't we?
Yeah. Oh, it depends what time. Someone will have to kick me off because I'll just keep talking. So I'll be guided by you guys. So I'll quickly try to just explain this because this piece is obviously already on. So at the moment it's tacked down here. So what I've done is I've helped it in to that first recess. Now, if this had the, this was an entire panel that went all the way down, I might have, well, I probably would have peeled the backing downwards and left the fold of the backing paper somewhere around here. And what that does is it means that the bottom half of the van isn't going to stick. It's still got the backing on, and the curvature of the backing keeps it off the panel here. And I've only got this piece here stuck on. Allows me to just deal with the recess first, and then go, then I can peel the backing off and do the rest of it. This corner up here, I'm just going to focus this camera here, this other camera going to the, so I'm just going to keep this one focused right on that corner. I'm not going to apply any more than this at the moment. I want this whole corner to be able to be folded back. If I was to wrap all the way up like this and seal it off, it just limits the amount of access I have to this part. So there's no harm in just leaving that like that. So now I can sort of go around and quickly, it's hard to sort of rush these things, but see if I can give you a good idea of what I would actually do. So hit the outside parts because they're already touching and the bottom's touching. It will start to grab on in the middle, but I still want to start pushing this recess in as much as I can before I heat it. And you'll actually see, I don't know if this, can you guys see what's happening here? When I'm pushing this in, it helps pop the vinyl back off the middle. So that was tacked to here. And as I've pushed this in, it's pulled it. Now it's gone back. It has tacked here, but that's the difference between 200 mil of stretch and 400 mil. So I'm going to work my way around this edge as much as I can without heat. Now I'm going to introduce heat. And I'm going to keep it moving pretty quickly because I want to get as much of this outer edge in as I can before it starts biting on to the middle. I'm sort of heating a little bit ahead of where I'm going. So that got it in a couple of mil. So now I can see that it's wanting to start biting here. So I am going to start just applying the middle because I don't want to create a massive bubble. Now this can be a little bit tricky. By doing this technique, you do have to sort of work out a bit of air in the middle, but I find it's preferable to have to fight with a bit of air. The benefit of getting that in 2 or 3 mil is worth having to do this. And as long as you do this quickly, you'll have no problems pushing the air out. I don't need to apply the entire middle right to the edge. I just want to get the bulk of the middle section down. So now I'll revert back to, I'm going to heat down low. I'll just focus on this top section.
You've rolled over the first piece, applied the center, and now you're coming back to the channel.
Heating low, pushing in up high. So now I've got that in probably halfway. I'm now going to touch it onto the next recess. And I only just want to hit that one, because again, if I push too far up, I'm taking away the stretch I can get there. So this will start to turn a corner here. So I'm just going to stop as that ducks down. And this is where, again, I have to stop. I basically leave one whole corner without finishing it, and that's so that I can work the film out that way. And I'll show you what that looks like. So now that I've hit that recess, hit that highlight there, now I'll come up and finish applying this bottom bit so that it actually exposes that edge. Can you guys see that coming up in the reflection? Just go to the handheld there. So now you can see it's bridged from the outer recess to there. It's bridged, but I am in halfway. Tacked it onto there, and then applied this bottom bit. So now I'm going to tackle this recess here. Again, actually, sorry, that's wrong. I'm going to do this top one first. So heat low on this side. And then push in on the top. And again, now I've got into the deepest part, the valley, and I've hit there. So now I've got this middle section I've got to remember to apply. So that's how to do that bit, you know, and you get the idea of how I'm going to finish this. I'll then heat the top part first and apply the bottom. So now I've done the outside one all the way in, heated here, and I've pushed this one into the valley, and then just sort of finish off this one. And I'll just push that edge. Still a little bit of residual heat left. I'll see if I can do this holding the handheld. Just going to heat at the bottom. And push in at the top. Do that in a couple of goes. Now I can feel it's resisting me, so I need to add a little bit more heat. And I'm there. So the good thing about doing it like this is that I know there's still the vinyl bridged in the middle. So I know that at all times I had that much vinyl to stretch from, and you can see. So this is obviously just a small section, but in the interest of time, just focusing on this. So you just basically repeat this all the way around. I will show you this corner though. Are we going to get cut off, Neil, or does it automatically kick us out?
No, I don't believe Cohen.
No, this will keep going. So this can go on for as long as it needs, and we can just stop when you guys are finished, basically.
Okay, beautiful. So now I'm going to might bring this camera in because I really want to focus on this corner. So I'm just going to do a camera adjustment.
You're moving to that corner, what, to show how you would release the air, Cal, or just the fact that it's the corner?
Yeah, well, just to release, this is the part, the corner.
Yep.
Is, yeah, let's assume I've wrapped the rest of it. This is now a trapped corner. So this bit that I've done, do you want to flick to that one there? This bit that I've done here, I've done that everywhere. Let's just say I'm working my way into this corner, which is trapped, I guess. So I'll quickly do the same at the bottom. Heating on this side to wrap it in here. Get that next highlight. that side. So another reason why I like to do this inside, I don't like to save this inside one till last, which I used to. I used to do this inside one last, and I actually had a lot of the failures that I would get on this last recess. Even though it was sort of the smallest, it tended to give me the most trouble. So I'm going to finish this inside one. I'm going to join up the two now. So now this is actually, I'm doing sort of the opposite. I'm bringing towards the corner, whereas in the first demo, I was working from the corner out. So you do need to be dynamic. Switch it up when you have to. Do that little sort of slicing technique.
What order would you wrap, Cal? Top left side, bottom right side when working up into the corner?
That's a good question. So what side of this is the driver's side? For this exact panel, you probably wouldn't do this corner last, because on the other side, you actually have an easier escape, because that, you know, it goes in and then it goes off. So that's an easier escape. You're only going to get to there. So I'm sort of purposefully making this one harder.
But also for demonstration, the way your workshop's set up, that's the easier corner for you to work over.
Yeah, this corner is sort of a bit better. And it, you know, I want to show you the harder bits. But it almost doesn't matter which of the other corners you do. I would probably start on the opposite corner to the one I'm finishing on. There's a general rule. So for this panel, I'd start bottom left, and then work my way up and around from that, so that they both converge and finish up here. Okay. I think that makes sense. So again, heading up and away from this inside recess. It's a bit more. I'll do this part again with the squeegee, just get right into that. And every now and then you'll see these little sort of divots. I don't know if that shows up, but those will go away with a little heat, and just let it go. Heat it and let it cool and relax. And those will resolve themselves. Don't try to work away at that or push on it while it's hot. So now I'm forced into coming around the corner now. I've done all the flat. So now I'm going to add more heat. Now this is where, if you need to, you can lift this up a bit more, warm it and reset it. And I always like to leave this loosely draped. So I put this bit of a fold in it rather than pulling it tight. And I'm going to move that because I don't need that yet, but I'll put that back in when I finish this. So now I'm just going to work my way around this corner. I know this is sort of tricky for you guys to see, but I'll bring the handheld in a second.
Just while you're carrying on, Cal, but just for the benefit of everybody on the call, one of the other questions was bumpers and inlays. I think that's a whole another morning session. But yeah, definitely we'll have a conversation about when we can do that. Get Cal's workshop set up. I know he's got some really good tips about hiding when you do inlays and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I've got a whole lot on inlays and front bumpers. If anybody happened to be at my demo I did in Hamilton, I happened to have a really good hire car for that purpose. I've just forgotten what it was. I think it was might have been the new CRV or the new Civic maybe, but it had just a really nice place to do a hidden join on the front bumper. So that definitely is one that we'll work towards doing in the future. The front
He just has to go and raid another scrapyard for another car part so that we can do these things.
Exactly. So I'm just going to bring the handheld camera up, Colin. So I've gone halfway around this corner. So you can see if I just track back to where I was, that was where I first started. I've worked in and across here. Obviously, I've still got this bit to do. And I've gotten halfway around that corner. So you can see what I sort of deal with when I'm wrapping a corner like this. I do have these little lines. So I'm going to see if I can do this with the, hopefully it's not too shaky for you. So I'm going to get the squeegee tip and I'm just gently working, getting that corner right the way in there and working it around. Now you can see I've only just got to the valley or the deepest part, and you can see those rippled lines. So what I'm going to do now is just do what I said before, heat it and let it relax. So they've settled a little bit, and then you'll see that when I go over this again, they basically disappear. And now it's gone back to smooth. Now I've just got the rest of this bit to go. So I'll put that handheld down for a sec. So again, focusing on the outside, hit the inside. So now I've got that whole inside part done. I now need to work my way to the next one. So I'm going to now bring the top parts of the recess over. Now this is an exception to what I said before. I'm going to tension this bit and just tack it, purely just to help this out. It's not going to stay that way. I will relax it back off. But I just want to settle this film out. I'm not worried about this crease here, or not crease, but this bunch up here, because I'm not focusing on that recess yet. I'm just focusing on this inner one. So now focus the heat on the inside. And I'm going to basically wrap as if I'm going up to the corner, but I'm not going to finish the corner. I'm just going to stop like that. Now this is where I can put this tool in. Can you guys see where the tip of that is? It's just sitting over the edge. So that when I wrap this over, the vinyl sort of holds it in place. So this can look a bit messy at this point because nothing up here is getting worked on. It's just what's happening down here. So hopefully you can see. Yeah, I'll bring the camera in. You guys see the tip of that wrap tool is there, just stuck to the inside of the vinyl. That's all it needs to do for now. It's just holding that open. So now I'll heat on the inside. And work vinyl in on the outside. So again, I don't want to push that all in one go, but you can probably see that's that's 2/3 of the way in there. So I could do the rest of that bit in one go, like finishing it in one go, if you will, even though I've already had 4 or 5 goes to get it to there. You just want to press it close to that air release point, but not get so close that it goes completely tight. So now do the same at the bottom. So now, flip to the handheld, you can see I've wrapped this side's all the way in up until there. So the only part on this that isn't wrapped is that bit there. And I still haven't finished off this inner bit. So I do need to remember to smooth down all of this. You can see there's not major distortion yet. So I always like to sort of check as I'm going to see if anywhere's been overstretched, but it looks pretty good so far. So I'm just going to bring all this flat panel upwards. Now this is where, so now hopefully you can just see I've wrapped the vinyl all the way up. I've sort of got a bubble, but it's technically not a bubble because it's not trapped. I've got a release point. So now I'm going to bring this camera in. So now that the air tool's, this little tool's basically done its job, it's allowed the air to escape. I'm going to now put it aside and peel the vinyl back to do this last part. So I'm going to pin the film loosely with a nice big sort of bulge in it there that allows me this excess vinyl. And this is where sort of some of the techniques not go out the window, but this is its own sort of thing here. It's not exactly like anything else I've done. You just have to sort of massage this film in and up. And I do like to have this film, the excess, sort of sticking straight back out. If I have it pulled tight, it's going to automatically want to bridge itself onto that little highlight. So just going to, and I am warming directly on this bit of film, but it's not overstretching because it's not sort of pinned or bridged to anything else. So then there'll come a point where it isn't going to really go much further without sort of buckling up. So now I'm just going to warm it, hold the film out. So you need 2 hands for this. Hold the film out while it's warm. See, I think that's got a little crease because I went too fast. If that happens, pull it back, heat it, go again. So I don't want to stretch this. I'm pulling this piece purely to hold tension, but I don't want to pull on it. So you can see, so I've got in the first, in the second, so I'm halfway or 2/3 of the way through. I've done the first 2 in the recesses. So get the idea, and you just do that again. So I'll finish this off quickly. So this bit here is a bit sort of, this film has sort of sat and been tacked and lifted and stuff, so it will need a bit of a warm just to settle it all out.
So a couple of things coming on the chat there. Cal, first of all, from Mark, he said, nice, just exclamation mark. And I think, yeah, that was a beautiful demonstration there up on that corner. Leanne, yeah, the challenge is trying to get a customer a client to understand how much work is involved. Yeah, clients don't realize how much work's involved. And you know, this is the reason why training and wrapping workshops really are so important, because anything that can help save a bit of time and perfect something just makes your life so much easier, and hopefully fails. No, you don't get any failures, but yeah, I don't think you're ever going to get end users to really truly appreciate how difficult that is. They just say, oh, there's a bit of vinyl on a vehicle, it can't be that hard. So that's a very difficult one to ever get across, Leanne. And then from Greg, Cal, so ideally you'd get all the recesses sorted out first and then finish the flat areas in between, question mark.
Yes,
yeah.
definitely. So, you know, I touched on the, I'll just zoom out for a second. I touched on the bottom section. So this would be, let me just get a bit of film. Sure you know what I mean, but let's just pretend this is the full piece. Peel the backing, leave half the backing on like that, and then that sits about there. So again, pretend this is the full side of the van. And you can see that curve of the backing at the side there. I want that nice and round. I don't want to crease that, because that holds the entire bottom part of the panel off while I deal with the recess. And then, so that's one part sort of isolated, the bottom part. Now, again, this is if you do the door on its own. I understand if you do a whole van in one piece, this gets trickier. You can still do it, but you'll need multiple people. If you've got a 4 meter long print, it's quite difficult to peel the backing top to bottom. You often go left to right. But if you do have enough staff, you can still do it top to bottom. And I have done a whole van like this with the entire side of a van left not tacking on at all. And I've just done the top. But in this instance, what I would say is the better way to do an eyelid is to do at least the sliding door on its own. So then, yes, to move on to the rest of your question, then I deal with the recesses. Obviously, there comes a point where you have to hit the middle section. But even this top bit up there, I don't know if that's in the frame.
Just a little bit higher, that's it, great.
Even the top bit, I don't need to apply. There's no rush to get that. I'll let that sort of drape across so that it's not going to get dust. I don't want it like that, hanging back on itself. But there's no need. It's from the outer recesses in that's the most important, because anywhere where the vinyl is already touching, it's starting to grab, it's starting to bite. So anywhere on these highlights, I just want to get this on as soon as possible. If I was to sort of leave this here overnight, if I got called away and I couldn't finish it and I came back, when I went to finish it, there may possibly be a glue line there. And that would be because the bit that's stuck has reached its full bond, and the bit that hasn't is still fresh. And they just go down differently. You'll never get glue lines when you're wrapping in the moment, though. If you wrap this whole panel start to finish, you're not going to get glue lines. But it is sort of an explanation as to why I sort of tackle something and I want to start it and finish it before I move on. Another good reason why I like to leave the backing like that is because if you pull the whole thing off, you can still approach the recess first, but there's a good chance you're going to lean on this, and just with gravity, it's going to start sticking onto the panel. And you know, if it takes you an hour to do the top recess, that's an hour that this bottom vinyl has started to bond on. So by keeping the backing on it, it just keeps it off until you're ready to get to it. So I try to isolate things. I try to segment them, if you will, break them up into sections. So the recess becomes its own section, and then everything else.
Okay, Cal, I think we're certainly over 2 hours already. Do you want to just have a 2 or 3 minute summary? But what we'll do, promising everybody here that we'll be talking to Computer later after this morning. It's evident that lots of questions, good participation, and we definitely have lots more that Cal wanted to cover. And maybe early part of next week, we'll come back out to you guys and say, right, okay, we're going to do bumpers or we're going to do lasers. There's lots of things that Cal had planned for this morning. And it just will, it's good that we've had good interaction. We've had to go back to that. So Cal, do you want to wrap up? We'll get with Computer Letter and we'll come back to everybody for part 2 and part 3. Yeah,
awesome. Thank you so much for sticking around. I had no idea that we'd gone 2 hours. That felt like 30 minutes for me. I just get lost in these sort of things. Hopefully you can tell how passionate I am about rapping. I love it. And I want to do more of these. So the more noise you guys make, the more that you shout out to your reps, to Dina, to Rachel, to Computer Letter, say, hey, we want to do more of these. I really want that create that interest and create that drive, because that'll get me doing more of these and focusing on all the other things that we want to do. I didn't get to the door handle or the other part, but there'll be a next time. We will cover those off. I'll make sure of it. So thank you, everyone. Neil, do we want to do any final questions or do we need to wrap up?
Well, we've got a couple of final questions. One question from Lonal is, how long does it take to wrap a van? An eyelid, for instance.
So variable, panel by panel. If it's a color change, it's one time. If it's commercial, I couldn't even give you an answer on that. I think I could probably get all the vinyl on in a couple of days, in a day and a half. But a full eye load I would want to keep in my shop, if I had one, for 4 days. And that's leaving a day up your sleeve. If you've got multiple installers, it completely changes. Still try and keep it overnight though. Even if you can smash out a full wrap in 1 day, I don't like doing it because, like I talked about, you don't have the benefit of letting the film sit overnight. You're rushing to finish it. Rather keep it relaxed. If something goes wrong, you've got to reprint. Well, you might need to stay back and do overtime, but you can. If they're coming at 4 and you drop a print on the ground, it's hard.
Okay, and the questions keep coming. So is the same technique used when you're using app tape on the graphic?
App tape changes everything. If it's paper app tape, it doesn't stretch at all. So yes, the technique absolutely has to change. If you're doing die cuts, if you're doing a cut logo that needs app tape over a recess, I'd say don't. Try to avoid doing that. That's not going to go well. Unless you can keep the parts only going across one directional. So a stripe can go in here, out here, in here, out here, no worries. But one stripe that goes up around here, if it's a loop and comes back, it turns too many corners, there's too many angles. So that's where...
Another whole session on how to make commercial wraps work easier for the wrapper.
And eyelids are almost in their own category in LDVs. So there's smart designing, keeping things away from these corners. And another thing I'll say is if you do have a logo to go on the side, it is a good idea to do the logo in a separate layer so that the wrapping, the base film does all the stretching and any distorting, and then the logo goes on after and hopefully just folds gently in rather than stretching it. So I find you get the best result, least distortion on people's logos by doing them as an overlay.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Cal, and thank you, Computer Letter, for hosting this. And definitely we need to come back very quickly to you guys with part 2 and part 3.